Hey guys, Daydreamer here, and welcome back to another Clash Royale video. Today, we are once again taking a look at the top 5 decks used in August of 2021. Now, despite there not being any sort of balance changes this month, we still have seen a slight shift in some of the most popular decks in this current meta. So today, I've gone ahead and put together 5 decks that have done consistently well in both top ladder as well as in grand challenges. So hopefully you guys can find one that piques your interest. Before we get into the video, if you could please leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel. We're so close to 100,000 subscribers, so any support would be greatly appreciated. Also, use code Legendaray, you get the dealio. Let's get right into the decks. Number 1, Goblin Drill Cycle. This is a new variation of Goblin Drill Cycle, and you can see it's actually quite interesting. It's got a bit of a bridge spam element mixed in with a princess for some odd reason, but it actually works very, very well. And the premise of this deck, like most Goblin Drill decks, is being fast and aggressive all of the time. Starting off the match, I am always going to be making that first play, going in on the aggressive end and trying to force out responses from my opponent. The main goal of this deck is to continuously apply pressure to prevent your opponent from being able to execute the pushes that they would like. So let's start off taking a look at the offensive end. Of course, a majority of the pushes that you're going to be making are very, very small. A bandit or a royal ghost at the bridge, as well as a goblin drill to the tower. In addition to just making these plays at the bridge, however, this deck is also a bit of a double lane pressure deck. Because it's a chip deck, you're going to be wanting to pressure in both lanes. For example, if the opponent has to go in with a royal ghost to defend the goblin drill, well, maybe they won't have anything for the bandit you've placed in the opposite lane. Another reason I think this deck works so well is because the defense of this deck actually has a synergy with this deck's offense, and I'm talking about the Tesla. Because oftentimes if you have a surviving Tesla on defense, you can force even more value out of the Tesla by simply playing something cheap like a bandit at the bridge. Of course, the opponent's going to respond to that bandit, and then the Tesla's just going to take out whatever the opponent played down to destroy the bandit. With all that aside, let's break down the defense. This deck is a quick cycle deck, meaning that the defense of this deck will be a little bit more difficult. Your two buildings are the Tesla and the goblin drill. Keep that in mind. The goblin drill is a building, so use it to distract the opponent's tanks if necessary. Adding on to that, you're going to want to make sure that you space your units out far because your units are so weak. Make sure the princess is far away from all your other defensive units so that she's able to snipe units away from afar, and make sure that you protect the bomber with the bandit as well as the royal ghost, whose goal on defense is basically to stall time to allow your Teslas, princesses, bombers, and tower to take down the opponent's push. Of course, skeletons and the fire spirit are very, very effective, not just to cycle, but also to get some positive elixir trades on defense. So all in all, a very, very well-rounded and fast-paced deck. Number 2, Graveyard Control Cycle, kind of. It's a new splash card deck. You know, Mother Witch has dominated this meta for so long and boxed Graveyard out, but now that we've kind of figured out how to control the Mother Witch, well, Graveyard's obviously making a bit of a comeback. And you know what was the most popular Graveyard deck? Well, it was Splash Yard, because the defense of this deck is so solid. At just 3.4 average elixir, you get the defensive control the old Splash Yard had, but you also get a bit more of a cycle potential when you're trying to break through onto your opponent's tower. So starting off the match, very, very reactive based. I may cycle a bar barrel or a goblin cage, but aside from that, I'm just going to be playing reactively based on what my opponents are going to play. If they play something expensive in the back, well, you can immediately go in with a graveyard in the opposite lane. You have a ton of mini tanks to do so. Baby Dragon, Dark Prince, or Bar Barrel are all very effective tanks for the graveyard. But if they played something a little bit cheaper, well, you're going to want to focus on defending what your opponents have, formulate a positive elixir trade off of that defense, and then go in with a graveyard on a counter push. I find that this is going to be generally what happens when I play most of my matches. I have surviving counter push units, and then I go in with a graveyard to maximize on that elixir value. For each of your offensive pushes, make sure that your graveyard has some sort of mini tank, and again, if the opponent has the Mother Witch, fireball her out as soon as possible. You literally, this is a must. You gotta fireball the Mother Witch out, or else you're gonna suffer the consequences on the subsequent defense. Speaking of the defensive end, well, I mean, this is such a self-explanatory defense that, I mean, do I really have to explain it? First off, Goblin Cage is going to be your way of distracting tank units such as the Electro Giant, the Giant, and so on and so forth. Following that, you're going to be wanting to control the defense using your splash units, the Baby Dragon, the Dark Prince, as well as the Tornado to slowly but surely take down your opponent's defense. The Tornado is extremely useful not only to get King Tower activations, but to also synergize with your splash units. And even on offense, it'll play a role in getting you some splash damage onto the opponent's tower. Again, this is a bit of a more fast-paced deck, so you're going to be applying a bit more aggression than you would a traditional graveyard deck, but all in all, still a very easy deck to pick up and play. Now, what top 5 deck would be complete without another Electro Giant deck? Now, this is going to be a bit more of a passive control type of Electro Giant beatdown, and like most Electro Giant decks, there are 2 ways of breaking through to your opponent's tower. The first being just the traditional beatdown way, getting your support troops as well as the Electro Giant to the tower, but alternatively, you can just focus on getting the Electro Giant itself to the arena tower, because as soon as that Electro Giant gets to your opponent's tower, that's pretty much just game over. Starting off the match, just like that previous deck, going to be very control based, very passive, and very reactive. Maybe a Goblin Cage in the center is okay, but aside from that, I'm generally just going to be reacting to what my opponents are playing. The great thing about this deck is that there are multiple answers for pretty much anything that you're going to need. You've got Dark Prince, Bomber, and kind of the Mother Witch to take care of swarms, the Inferno Dragon to take care of tanks, and then the Goblin Cage to pull any sort of building targeting units that the opponents might have. Again, the Tornado is very useful to get King Tower activations as well as to synergize with units such as the Bomber and the Dark Prince. And because a lot of these units are slightly on the tankier side, you're much more likely to have surviving units that will be able to be used on a counter push. Now, if you have a counter push, there are situations where you can go in with an Electro Giant at the bridge, but more often than not, what's going to happen is your counter push units are going to cross the bridge, and while your opponents are defending those units that cross the bridge, well, you can go in with an Electro Giant in the back and begin building up a big beatdown push. Moving on to the offense, well, it's a beatdown deck, so the offense is pretty self-explanatory. The Electro Giant goes in front and all of your ranged units go in behind. However, you're going to have to pay attention to what counters your opponents will have. If they have something such as an Inferno Tower or an Inferno Dragon, well, you're not really going to support with your supporting units, but you're instead going to be using your spells to reset those charging units to get the Electro Giant to the tower. Alternatively, if they have swarms, well, the Mother Witch, Bomber, and the Dark Prince are what you're going to be supporting with. If they have something like a P.E.K.K.A., well, then maybe consider using your Inferno Dragon. Tornado synergizes so well with the Electro Giant because, again, you can pull those range units into that zap range. And again, keep in mind the goal is to just simply get that Electro Giant to the opponent's tower. Number 4, Royal Giant Beatdown. Now, the variation I'm showing today does have a lightning in for the fireball, but if you are, kind of just sick of facing fireball bait, well, then the fireball can also come in as well. Now, if you take a look at this deck, the build is kind of similar to the Electro Giant deck that we shared just before, but this is going to be a little bit more of a faster paced deck because the Royal Giant is a card that you can also play at the bridge to apply immediate pressure onto the opponents. Starting off the match, however, we're going to be playing this deck almost exactly the same. Just react to the opponent's plays, and if they do actually go in with something expensive in the back, well, you can always play that Royal Giant at the bridge in the opposite lane to pressure. Starting off on the defense of this deck, Dark Prince is kind of your only defense against splash units, and if you are against a Goblin Drill, you're going to always make sure to save the Dark Prince for the Goblin Drill. Mother Witch and the Electro Spirit can do the remainder of the Swarm defense. The Mega Minion is going to be your tank destroyer as well as your main air defense, and then the Fisherman is going to serve as your way to deal with building targeting units, not only pulling big tanks to your King Tower, but also just controlling the defensive side, picking and pulling apart the push that the opponent has sent. The offense of this deck is going to be much more based off of counter pushes. If you have surviving units and the elixir, simply just go in with a Royal Giant in front, and it's already going to be very difficult to stop because a Royal Giant, just one shot, does so much damage to the opponent's tower. However, depending on what type of defenses your opponents have, it's again important to pick and choose what you're going to support the Royal Giant. For example, if they have swarm counters to the Royal Giant, maybe use the Mother Witch or the Dark Prince to take care of the opponent's swarms. On the other hand, if the opponent has something like a P.E.K.K.A., well, then the Fisherman is going to be your go-to answer, pulling that P.E.K.K.A. away and allowing that Royal Giant to ravage the opponent's tower. Now, an alternative way to break through, and you're going to mostly do this against cheaper decks, is you're going to be playing this more like a beatdown deck. Going in with the Royale Giant in the back, supporting it just like you would a classic beatdown deck, and maybe even cycling to a second Royale Giant to play on offense as well. And of course, at number 5, we have a Lava Hound Balloon deck. No top 5 decks list would be complete without this. Lava Hound is just constantly a pain in the backside in this Clash Royale meta, but it works, so unfortunately, I gotta share it. Now, recent variations of Lava Hound have switched to a very aggressive variation, just like this deck you see here. It's got a quicker cycle, but taking a look at the defensive options you have, it's kind of trash. I mean, for ground defense, you have the Bomber, the Skeletons, and the Miner, I guess. And then the Inferno Dragon's your only answer to tanks. But don't worry, because this deck is all focused on offense. Starting off the match, and if the opponent plays something in the back, we'll just immediately Lava Hound. Your focus is to just maintain constant aggression on your opponent, making sure that they literally cannot formulate any sort of offense against you. So taking a look at your offense, well, it's very simple. It's very beatdown-esque. Of course, your supporting units are going to be the Balloon, the Inferno Dragon, and the minions, and then the Miner will be sent in before the Lava Hound pops to take out the Lava Pups. One important thing to watch out for with a Lava Hound push, however, is the spell value. If you're going to be losing a match with Lava Hound, that is going to be the most common reason. Alternatively, with this deck, you can also apply a little bit of double lane pressure as well. If you have a Lava Hound going down one lane and you notice that your opponents are spending a lot of their air counters, well, then you can kind of try and swerve them and go in with a balloon push in the opposite lane. Because this deck is a little bit on the cheaper side of Lava Hound, you can be a little bit more flexible in what type of push that you're going to be formulating, as long as you're constantly pressing and being the aggressive player in the match. On the defensive end, again, your main goal is to just play offense with defense. Oftentimes you're just going to be sacking tower damage or even sacking entire towers just to formulate pushes. But on the defensive end, aside from just using the Miner, the Skeletons, and the Bomber as best as you possibly can, one important trick that I have found is that if you are using an Inferno Dragon and the opponent has like an E-Wiz, you can oftentimes use the Skeletons and the minions to actually tank for the Inferno Dragon so that the E-Wiz will not be able to get its reset hits onto the Inferno Dragon. So there we go, my top 5 decks to run in this current August 2021 meta. Again, hopefully you guys did find a deck that did pique your interest, because each of these 5 decks has shown to do very well in the current Clash Royale meta. I wish you guys the best of luck in the arena, but unfortunately, guys, that's all I've got time for in today's episode. Huge thanks to all of my channel members. You guys are the absolute G's. If you enjoyed, please leave a like down below, as well as a subscription to my channel. And as always, this is Legendaray, and I'm signing off. See you guys next time.